All right, hey guys, I'm going to go ahead and read through the very big branch document. So as you can see, I got the reading here. I'm going to go ahead and read through it. I'll stop and ask some questions or just highlight some stuff. Hopefully you guys have gotten a chance, or you should have gotten the chance to look through these and pretty much have most of it completed. But I thought it might help just to have somebody else read through it so you're not doing it all on your own. So the first subtitle we've got a big job to do. The job of the executive branch is to carry out the laws that the legislative branch passes. When you think of the executive branch, you probably think of the president, but the president is only the head of the executive branch. He is like the tip of the iceberg. Underneath, there is a giant organization with lots of people doing many different jobs. In fact, the executive branch is the largest branch of our government. So if you can see this little graphic here, excuse me. It's got the president being at the top of that little iceberg, and then all of the executive departments, agencies, and other workers down below. And so the president is just kind of the spearhead. He's at the top of the pyramid, and then everybody else that's part of this huge branch is under him. So help from many. Most of the executive branch is made up of departments and independent agencies. Departments are the main organizations in the executive branch. There are 15 departments. Each one focuses on a specific type of activity, such as education, transportation, defense, or energy. These are going to be kind of similar to those congressional committees we learned about right before we left. Each department has smaller agencies that do specific jobs and works to prevent crime. Two agencies inside of the Department of Justice, or the DOJ, are the Federal Bureau of Investigation, we know that as the FBI, and the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. The FBI investigates certain kind of crimes, while the DEA deals with crime related to drug and controlled substances. So if you guys watch any kind of crime shows, Criminal Minds, Breaking Bad, anything like that, you guys have heard of those before. The president appoints a secretary to lead each department, but the head of the Department of Justice is called the Attorney General. These secretaries do more than just lead the department. They are the president's cabinet, a group of people that give advice and help the president make important decisions. Officials who hold the cabinet-level positions such as Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Education or the Secretary of Homeland Security are very important players in the executive branch. So other than departments, we also have kind of a step under departments. We have independent agencies. So you guys have probably heard of NASA, FDA, things like that. Those are independent agencies. So independent agencies are government organizations that also focus on specific issues, but they are different from departments because they aren't directly controlled by the president or executive branch. These agencies are created by Congress in order to address concerns not easily solved through legislation. They are often controlled by a board of commissions, and there are usually restrictions on how the president appoints and removes members. So that's going to be just further groups created to help the executive branch kind of actually enforce all the laws that are created by Congress. So carrying out the laws, enforcement, what does it mean to carry out the law? It depends on what kind of law that needs to be carried out. Some laws make things illegal and describe consequences for those who do those things. Executive agencies enforce the laws when someone isn't following it out. There are several things an agency can do to enforce the law. They can educate the public. They can monitor the public and make sure laws are being followed. They can catch individuals and organizations not following the law. They can take the offenders to court and follow other enforcement procedures the agency may have. So this is going to be kind of similar to like the criminal justice process, but there's a little bit more independence and specificity, or specific things that fall under each agency, rather than like we think of like a police force or something like that. So scrolling down, we're on our second page. Carrying out the laws or regulations. Other laws are just instructions about something that must be done, such as installing new security procedures at the nation's airports. A law like this will not include every last detail about how it should be carried out. Instead, the law will authorize the executive branch to do these details. The rules have power similar to laws. Some regulations, sorry, I skipped a line. The rules the executive branch makes about how the law will be carried out are called regulations. So you guys have heard of probably the term rules and regulations. They kind of work the same way. You can think of them kind of being very similar and working hand in hand. Regulations have similar power to laws. Some regulations make activity illegal, and others give instructions for how something must be done. So we have regulations at school, or rules, about dress code, about the safety of our building, about the cleanliness of our building, things like that. And so if we look at this little, this little chart, we have Congress passes Clean Air Act. So the Environmental Protection Agency, that's the EPA, their actions can be enforce regulations necessary, conduct inspections, educate people about how to follow these regulations, and issues regulations that limit air pollution. So these are all things that the EPA has to do in order to enforce a Clean Air Act that Congress passes. So agencies enforce and regulate. Most departments and agencies both enforce laws and make regulations. For example, the EPA is an independent agency whose goal is to protect the environment and human health. It carries out laws passed by Congress, such as the Clean Air Act, that is designed to limit air pollution. The Clean Air Act authorizes the EPA to set limits on how much pollution there can be into the air. To do this, the EPA has to issue regulations that say exactly how much pollution from vehicles, factories, and other sources can put in the air. I'm not sure if Dade County has it, but a lot of counties, they'll have an emissions test for your car. That's part of this because your car puts out pollutants in the air. And so if it is putting out too much, they won't pass your car for an inspection. And you have to get that annually or every year. The EPA then works to enforce these regulations. Violating them can result in penalties. So if you were to, in certain counties, if your car could not pass an inspection, you technically are not supposed to drive it, and you would get some sort of consequence for not following that regulation, if we are sticking with that example. Scrolling down, so maintaining order and safety. We depend on many parts of the executive branch to keep us safe and keep order. For example, the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, not DCHS, but DHS, is responsible for protecting the United States against all kinds of threats. It includes agencies that deal with terrorism, natural disasters, and border protection. It also includes the Secret Service, whose agents protect the president and the vice president and their families. Inside the DHS, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, responds to natural disasters to help people get the help they need in an orderly way. The Coast Guard is also part of the DHS, patrols our nation's coastlines and watch for threats and helps boats in distress. And so the Coast Guard is going to help people in distress off our coast. And then if you think about, do you remember Congress has the power to punish pirates? So maybe if there happened to be a pirate ship on one of our coasts, the Coast Guard could apprehend them, and then it would be up to Congress to work with that agency to punish them. The Department of Defense, or DoD, is the biggest department. It includes all the military departments as the Army, Navy, and Air Force, as well as many other agencies. Together, all the parts of the Department of Defense work together to make sure our armed forces are prepared to protect our nation's security. So we have a huge defense budget and Department of Defense here in America. That's something that a lot of people take pride in, but it can also be controversial depending on who you're talking to. And that's something you guys can decide for yourself. If you are, we talked about that kind of in our congressional sessions and things like that. We have to decide where our money goes. We have to decide what's important. And defense has always been a top priority for the United States since it's been founded. And so this last paragraph, remember that most of the day-to-day activity in the executive branch involves ordinary people doing the work that needs to be done. An FBI agent conducts an investigation, a soldier participates in training exercises, or a worker monitors a nuclear reactor at an energy plant. The executive branch needs people to answer phones, program computers, file papers, do scientific research, process mail, fly airplanes, and clean bathrooms. In fact, the federal government is the nation's largest employer, and most of those jobs are in the executive branch. So even if you see this little picture of this mailman just on his route delivering mail, he's part of the executive branch. So he is part of what we call the bureaucracy. You guys saw that word in your doodle notes. And this man right here, he is in the same branch as the president and all the cabinet members. Although his title and his prestige is not the same, he is part of the same branch nonetheless. So down here, you're just going to look at this word bank, and you're going to read through the kind of titles and then descriptions of what these different cabinet positions or departments are going to be doing, and these will easily fit into those spaces. And then if we scroll down, you have to talk about which department, and you see them up there, which department do you think, or which secretary would say a quote? So which secretary of which department would say we need to invest in more solar electricity? Okay, so we know that's probably the department or the secretary of the Department of Energy. And then we go down here into whose job is it anyway, kind of like whose line is it anyway. You identify the executive agency that would most likely execute this. So if you guys have already played your executive command, which you should have, you know that when you get a law passed, you then have to delegate it out to somebody in your department. And so if you see some of these, again, we'll stick with this one. So the No Child Left Behind Act passed in 2001. You're going to give that to what agency or what department? And so that is something that you could easily do. We know that's going to be the Department of Education. But in executive command, you want to make sure you're giving out the right laws out to the right executive agencies. All right. So I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys soon.